Well, hello, everyone. I hope this message finds you alive, alert, awake, and enthusiastic about life and living. I am Elizabeth Green, the founder of the Indigo Institute of Nevada, where as a spiritual teacher and guide, I work with all of you highly sensitive, natural born leaders, which I call Indigos, live their best life now. I do that by sharing tips, strategies, and resources that will help you live your best life now. And I have been doing a series of interviews with indigos or people who are highly sensitive that may not consider themselves as indigos that have been sharing really good information that will really help you live your best life now. I talked about parenting and we looked at how using crystals can help you with protecting your aura. And today, what we're going to be talking about is how to protect yourself from EMFs. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's the electromagnetic frequencies which affect all of us. In my book, Building Spiritual Muscle, I talk about that. I talk about the fact that as a sensitive, I learned, and my book was done 9 years ago, I learned really quick that some of the symptoms that you experience when you're being affected by all of these electromagnetic frequencies is that you get dizzy, you have a lack of energy. For instance, this occurs when I use my cell phone for a prolonged period of time. I have my guest on who is the president of the BioElectric Shield. And I used a different method that I talk about in the book, but I am really happy to have my guest, Virginia Brown. Hello, Virginia.
Hello, good morning.
Who is the president of the BioElectric Shield. And I really am thankful that you took out time in your day to share with us tools and tips of how sensitives can really deal with all of the draining of their energy that may be affected by things that are in our environment, because that is one of the toxins that really affect indigos. Virginia, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Where do you live?
Well, I live in Southern Oregon. The beginning of my career was I got a master's degree in occupational therapy in Boston at Sargent College and BU, and I went into pediatrics and did that for 16 years in the schools, and I met many children who were probably indigos. Some of them had learning disabilities, and some of them had sensory processing issues. And it became more and more obvious to me as I also started to do therapeutic touch, something else I was trained in, that everything was affected by energy tremendously. And this was before all the kids today now are walking around with tablets and cell phones. And so energy is the name of the game when it comes to electromagnetic radiation. That is the energy that is actually around the transmission that allows you to use your cell phone at such a different vibration, about 16 to 19 million times faster than the human energy field, if you can believe that.
And yeah, it's interesting that we both started our careers as educators, because I spent 10 years teaching learning disabilities in the late 70s, early 80s, when I believe a large influx of indigos were coming upon this planet. And one of the things that I really recognized about them is how they were affected by their environment. And, not only the environment of picking up energy from other people, but as you said, we are now such a with technology being so prominent, it is really affecting how we, and not only does it affect the kids, but it affects the adults as far as being drained of energy. Why is that, or what are your insights on that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the even just the frequency that comes from a computer screen uh, is about, oh well, it's at 60 cycles. Well, electricity is at 60 cycles per second. The vertical rasters of a screen are at 450, and we're at eight cycles per second, and so we're being really bombarded by frequencies that are much, much faster than ours. And if you are already, as an indigo child or an empath, if you're already sensitive to energy, this is going to be all the more problematic for most folks that are empaths. On top of that, they're then picking up the energy from all the people around them. And so it's not just the energy from other people, it's now electronics as well. And so it's kind of a double whammy effect for those who are sensitive to energy.
Oh, I definitely agree with you on that. I Once I left teaching, I started traveling, doing you hear the fire truck going by. Um, I started traveling quite a bit. And as a sensitive who was really becoming more in tune with what I was picking up, I found myself being drained when I went into unfamiliar environments like hotel rooms, like having to be in a large group presenting, that I would immediately feel the effects of that negative energy. It's almost like walking outside to me and having rain come on you, and you just feel like, oh, totally drained. So when I started using a cell phone when they first were, well, you're probably of the age that you can remember the big cell phones,
Yeah.
the mobile phones, as they call them. And the more and more they got smaller, I remember myself having a terrible headache, and I didn't know why. And then I started realizing I was wearing one of those earpieces so I wouldn't have to hold the cell phone up to my head, not recognizing that that earpiece was also emanating a whole lot of static, as I call it, on the line. Have you found that to be the case?
Yes, and I was actually going to mention to you that you're really concentrating the electromagnetic radiation right into your brain. And a lot of the symptoms that people have, that they think maybe I'm just having a bad day. Let's say they're exhausted, they have fibromyalgia, they have headaches, they're agitated, they're stressed out, they're anxious. A lot
Mhm.
of these may have absolutely nothing to do with what they think it has something to do with, like, oh, my job is difficult or whatever. It could
Mhm.
be entirely environmental. And so part of what, as an occupational therapist, the motto of our profession is making doing possible. And, in common language, that just means, okay, what can we do for people that will allow them to live the life of their dreams? Allow them to do what they just want to be doing without having the environment make such a very challenging effect. I mean, if you have to travel for your job, going into an airport, getting on an airplane,
Mhm.
dealing with both people and everyone else's Wi-Fi or their cell phone, this is a problem. And so this is what the BioElectric Shield company, that's what the product is all about, is to allow people to basically have their own life back. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and see, I started last year, I believe. I met Anna Mariah, who also works for the BioShield company, and I had her on talking about crystals. But she came on, and I was really searching last year because I decided that I would take my business and use it online opposed to being exposed to all of those environmental things, not realizing or taking into account that the computer itself was going to be something that I would have to deal with. Now, I have, because I mean, I was having headaches, I was getting rashes, and I was like, wait, what is this? And then I recognized through people, and it's
Mhm.
nice how our guidance comes through people, that uh, there were perhaps ways that I could protect myself from these EMFs so they wouldn't affect me, so I wouldn't be experiencing some of the symptoms that a child or an adult will have that is labeled as ADHD. Now, it attention deficit, what ADHD, attention deficit,
Attention deficit, ADD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. That's what it stands for.
and because I always say attention dialed into a higher frequency, it was like, okay, or dimension, I had to think about what do people commonly think of as ADHD. Um, and some of the symptoms are you can't focus. But if you're
Right,
being
right.
bombarded by energy, it's very
Hmm.
difficult to sit in a chair and
Yes,
focus.
right. So they did a study a while back. A couple of different studies have been done. One was at the Spanish Neurological Institute, in which it's pretty famous. Everyone's seen the picture of a cell phone up to the brain, and depending on the age of the child, you see that the penetration of the radiation goes farther and farther in the younger they are. A second study was done showing that having a cell phone, having a child use a cell phone for only 5 minutes, say like at lunchtime, will disrupt their attention for up to 3 to 4 hours. I'm thinking to myself, okay, children go to school, they may use their cell phone before they go to school. Well, there goes the morning, and then they use it at lunch. Well, there goes the afternoon. So, we have a remarkable uptick in the number of individuals that that have focusing issues. And I think in some ways it's a red herring to think that all of a sudden there were just children born with these problems. Looking at the environment that we're all in, as you said, you're being bombarded by electromagnetic radiation from your computer. If you have Wi-Fi, that's additional bombardment. If you're using your phone, now you've got three things coming at you. And we know that electromagnetic radiation can cause real concentration problems. And they proved that in another study in Austria, Bavaria, actually. They put a cell tower where there had never been a cell tower. And what they found within 18 months was that many well, a high percentage of the population of that small town was starting to have problems with sleeplessness, concentration, and there was also an increase in the amount of adrenaline that was being, secreted. In other words, adrenaline is what happens when you're in a stress situation. So the body was saying, I am really stressed out. What you just did by putting that cell tower was not good for me. So there's plenty of evidence. There's a site called bioinitiative.org that, for those listeners who want to see the research, there's 1,800 studies on there that were reviewed by 28 scientists worldwide. So there's the evidence, that it's a problem.
I will put a link to that particular study so people who are listening who want to research more information will be able to do that. But one of the things that you have now, did you invent the product or how did you come upon utilizing a shield or finding something that would shield you from these electromagnetic frequencies?
Okay, so here's the story. In the late 80s, my husband, who is a chiropractic neurologist, and I were treating patients in Boston. So we had computer programmers that came to us. And what we noticed was that the computer programmers were having all these symptoms that we just talked about earlier. And the rest of our patients would come in, we would treat them, and, they would do very well, and we wouldn't see them again for several months. Not true with the computer programmers. You would treat them, and a couple of weeks later, they'd come back. We're like, what's going on here? So we went to the Harvard Medical School library, found all kinds of amazing research out of Sweden showing all these effects, not just with computers, but heavy machine operators, any place where there was an electromagnetic field, sewing machine operators. And so Dr. Brown did further research. He really had a series of waking dreams. I think you could put that into the indigo or some kind of category. That's how Einstein came up with his amazing, revelations about physics. But Dr. Brown had 3 waking dreams, and in those dreams, he saw a configuration of quartz and other crystals. We then took those configurations to a gifted individual we work with who had helped us with patients. That family is able to see energy fields to the cellular level because the lens structure of their eye is just different from yours and ours. Mm-hmm. They were able to tell us that the 3rd configuration we came up with was actually creating a very strong and balanced human energy field. And so that was the first bit of information that we got from the consultant, was that energy field would actually surround the person. He was holding the crystal matrix, and she just explained what she was seeing, and she said, this is balancing and strengthening the entire energy field of the body. We then walked next door, and he sat in front of a computer, and she watched the interaction as the radiation came off the computer and basically hit the cocoon that was around him now and was bounced off, which, as it turns out, was straight physics. They used quartz since 1915 and 1920. They won 3 Nobel Prizes in physics using quartz to refract X-rays. So it's basically applied physics that we're using in the BioElectric Shield. And we eventually thought, well, we have these crystals, people have to wear them somehow. So we put them in a pendant form. And the metal that surrounds the crystal matrix amplifies the effect. So brass is good, silver is stronger, silver with gold tabs is stronger, and gold is the strongest, form of protection. So okay. That's.
And now you have on one of those shields, correct?
Yes, I have. I get to wear the gold one. I've actually worn all the different styles because we've been around since 1990, so we've learned a lot along the way. And part of what happened also along the way was that we found out within the first year that not only was this the matrix that's inside the shield putting out this wonderful balancing energy field, and that it could protect you against electromagnetic radiation, but we also found out that it will deflect away any energy that's not compatible with you. And for empaths and indigos, that's the greatest news in the world, because that includes other people's energy, or, airport energy. So that was a huge revelation to us. And it was just someone wearing it that asked about it.
Yeah.
So
And I like the word that you use, cocoon, because when you are protecting your own energy field, like putting a cocoon on, that it's like putting a raincoat on. And you can go outside and not be affected by, you don't get wet when you put on your raincoat or you put up your umbrella. Well, by wearing the shield, it is protecting your energy field so it's not draining. As a sensitive, when I'm looking at people, I can tell, because that you can see it's almost like holes in an aura, where people have come and put little pin pricks all over, and without that cocoon, you're leaking energy, and that's why you're feeling drained. Just
yes.
imagine being able to hold your energy steady to plug up all of those holes, what you would be able to do. I don't know if that's simplifying it too much for you, but
That's no, that's a great explanation. And that reminded me a little bit of something that we developed along the way. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had a child that had some real problems, ADHD, ADD. And so I asked my consultant, the one that sees energy, I said, could you modify that crystal matrix so that it would really help somebody focus better? Because as a pediatric occupational therapist, golly, whoa, I had worked with so many children with that problem. And, you really feel compassion for it. And quite frankly, I had a little bit of that issue myself.
mhm.
So, and interestingly enough, more and more people are reporting that they're having trouble focusing, probably because of what we mentioned earlier about, EMF affecting concentration. So she took some months and actually developed, by adding a few extra crystals to the original matrix, a shield that we now call our focusing shield. And many of the folks that buy shields from us actually do get that shield, because the the extra gems help bring the energy field back to the normal 3 to 5 foot radius that it is for someone that doesn't have that issue. The consultant was able to tell me that these children that she has observed over the years that have the ADHD and the focusing problems, she said literally their energy fields flowed out about 25 to 30 feet from the body. And I went, "You're kidding." And she said, "No, that's what I see." And so that's, of course, while they're able to pay attention to something that's happening 20 or 30 feet away, it's too diffuse. So this particular shield actually brings it back to the right concentration so that a person, whether it's a child or an adult, can focus on what they want to focus on. It's been a wildly successful, uh, you know, product for people. It's helped them um, just function better. And I just have to tell you a quick little story. I was at a trade show in London. It goes for 10 days. So this woman came in on the weekend, and she purchased one of these focusing shields. And she came back, I think it was Wednesday, and she was just so excited. She said, "I am so grateful to you folks, because I went to work on Monday and it was the easiest day I've ever had at work. I was
Mhm.
able to focus on everything. And my boss came to me this morning and said, 'Hey, Susan, you are doing a really great job. I'm not sure what happened, but you're just, you're doing, your work is so much better.'" And that just makes a person feel good to be able to make a huge difference in someone's daily life.
And it's like turning down the volume, where you're not listening to everything else. You're not affected by everything else. You can totally concentrate on that you had planned on concentrating on because you're in this cocoon. It's like you sat down, you put the shield on, so you're in your cocoon. As I said, I found another device that was similar, not the same, but was similar to the one which you produced. And the results of it were amazing to see how children who weren't focusing automatically were and were centered. To see how even just placing it, I write about in the book how a mother went and bought it, put it in her daughter's room, didn't tell her daughter that it was in the room. Initially the daughter ran in and she knew automatically that something had shifted, something had changed in the room. And she found that when she wore it to school, that everybody wanted to touch it because they also could feel the difference in just that cocoon that she was wearing around, that she was stable, that she was grounded. Have you found that also to be the case?
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up because there's a mom that had been a distributor for us for a while. And she finally said, wait a second, I'm homeschooling my child because she can't handle being around class with other kids. Why don't I try a shield? So she actually just got her the focusing heart shield because her daughter loved the shape. She's a little girl. She was 8 years old. And she was able to go to school and absolutely be fine because she was in her cocoon. She wasn't bothered by other children's energy. She was an indigo. We've had other children that have the focusing issue, but this particular young lady was an indigo girl, and the mom was just astonished, as was the little girl. So needless to say, she's still several years later wearing that silver heart. Actually, it wasn't a focusing shield. Sorry, it was a regular silver heart shield for the indigo girl. And then, we have other children that are wearing their focusing shields, and they're just doing a lot better. I sent one to a child with mildly autistic, but again, a focusing issue. And the mom told me that this little boy just, really doesn't like to wear anything. However, this shield arrived. He put it around his neck, and she said, without anyone helping him, at night he puts it by his bed, and in the morning he immediately, when he gets out of bed, picks up the shield and puts it on because he said, Mom, I feel better.
Okay.
So the kids know.
Yeah. And you made well, first off, I want to make sure that everybody knows, and I will be putting it on the YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it at the bottom. If you're watching this on Facebook, I'll put it down in the comments where you can get the shield, because to me, we rely too much on chemicals to combat or to take care of the symptoms that these children are experiencing. And the chemicals are altering their brain and everything else. By putting on a simple shield that they can wear, like their raincoat, to put them in the cocoon, I would highly suggest to any parents who are really having a big problem with their child focusing, and before you consider adding putting them on Ritalin or any other of the medications, that you try a more holistic approach. So, Virginia, will you tell us how the listeners can get the shield? And I will put it again in the comments.
So if you go to BioElectricShield.com, there is right on the front page, it says shop now. And that's actually going to take you to a page that says, how do you choose correct protection? There's a quiz on there for the EMF exposure that the children or the adults are exposed to, and you fill out your own answers and you'll get a very specific recommendation. There's also at the top, it says shop now, and that'll actually take you to the products. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see it'll say BioElectric Shields, and you click on that, and there's one that says ADD focusing. If you go to our website, you're going to find links that will take you to all the products. We also have a tab that says the problem, and under that there's a section that says children, and you'll see a lot of articles on there that will address working with children. We don't just have shields for children that are with focusing issues. We actually have two shields for autism spectrum disorder. And I've also, written some blogs saying to parents, if you haven't had a child with a sensory processing disorder evaluated at your school, that might be a good thing to do. So that's a little bit of a detail. But as a pediatric occupational therapist, I wanted to throw that in because, diet and a shield and, structure at home and turning Wi-Fi off at night. These are, we have several suggestions that is for parents or for the rest of us to do to lower the impact of the energy that's around us that isn't always helpful.
Yeah.
So.
And also now just a comment on my part, people have looked at the price of it and they said, well, that's expensive. But remember, you are making a one-time purchase that will totally affect how your child is doing in school. And it's not something that you are going to be putting them on for life. I had students that were in fifth and sixth grade that have been on medication since they were in first grade. And I was like, wait a minute. You can't determine, yeah, that child may be moving around, but let's first look at all the other factors that might be affecting them and producing these symptoms before we put them on medication.
Right, and just to add to that, under the again on our website where it says problem, it also says solution, and under the solution tab, there's something called photo analysis. So if you're a parent or for yourself, if you want an individualized recommendation, you just click on that photo analysis, and we actually send photos and information over to that consulting family that I mentioned earlier. It's completely free. As an occupational therapist, my commitment is, when possible, diagnose first and then come up with a treatment plan. So we've had children that have, gotten the focusing shields and reduced the medication. Some of them have, had to stay on it, but at much lower doses. And then, eventually the idea is to get off of it. So you're right. There are many more options other than medication. And if you're a parent and you're living with it, it's very challenging to live with that. And so medication, even though parents don't want it, they feel like they don't have a lot of other choices. But the shield is definitely a choice that could certainly help that child.
And remember that it is your child's gift as an indigo to be so sensitive. So you don't want to turn it completely off. You just want to be able to turn it down so that they will learn to manage it and be able to use it productively, use that sensitivity productively to do what they came here to do, opposed to just deadening and not having any sensitivity at all and walking around like zombies.
Right. Yeah, and that you made a brilliant point, because with the shield, they're not going to um, deaden anything. They're just going to have that cocoon of protection around them, and they'll still feel things, but not the things that were overwhelming to them. So,
Yeah, well, I'm looking at my time. I said 25 to 30 minutes. We're already at 35 minutes. But
okay.
when I start talking about um, this area that I'm very passionate in, I'm like you, that as educators, our whole um, thrust or purpose is to make sure that people are successful. And when you find things that will help them be productive and live joyful, it is always my aim and my goal to introduce it to you. So, any last words, Virginia? Maybe I'll have to have you come back on. We'll see. I'm hoping to do this on a regular basis, do the show on a regular basis, but any last words that you would like to leave the audience with?
I would say, we invite you to visit our website. If you join our Facebook page, you're going to get regular tips all the time for EMF protection. And my last tip is put your Wi-Fi on a timer and have it off at night. That's really important. That allows you and your children to have the rest and recovery that they need, so they'll be ready to have a great day tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Something as simple as putting your Wi-Fi on a timer. Now, you said your Facebook group. What is what would they look for to join to get onto your face?
Bio, just BioElectric Shield, and they'll find us.
All right, I will definitely check that out and put that link also in the comments. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time. I hope for those that are listening to the replay that they've gotten information that will help them for themselves and for their children to find a way of protecting yourselves from all the electromagnetic frequencies that are out there so that you can live a joy filled and productive life. I thank you, Virginia. I thank you, everyone, for listening. May light, love, and plenty of laughter accompany you on the path. I am Elizabeth, and you have a blessed one.